just feel like these films are to blame for a whole wave of modern, this is something that's going to kill you and your friends and there's nothing you could do about it except there kind of vaguely is, horror movies, which are just garbage. I hold these films responsible for It Follows and Truth or Dare! Final Destination was a film about cheating death and how death doesn't like that, and it isn't quite as stupid as it sounds, but it is nearly as stupid as it sounds, okay? The height of naughty's horror franchises that wouldn't die, actually Saw was probably that, but this was a close second. Final Destination made it to a solid and respectable 5 films before finally dying off the way I do every time I see Tony Todd, because that dude's scary. Anyway, much like the Saw franchise was started by James Wan before he went on to make The Conjuring and Aquaman, these films were the brainchild of James Wong before he made Dragon Ball Evolution. Oh, Jesus. Anyway, let's review these bad boys. Here is my 1-minute review for Final Destination. The OG was a film from 2000, which feels at every step along the way like it's from the year 2000. We have Alex, who's going on a school trip to Paris but has a premonition about a plane exploding and gets thrown off with several other people who begin to mysteriously die in weird accidents that are idiotically convoluted. Yeah, seriously, death, if you can, you know, spring leaks to make them trip and fall into their thing and get electrocuted in their bath, why can't you just, you know, make them have a heart attack? Wouldn't be that hard. So Alex and the one person willing to believe him, whose name is actually Clear Rivers, they try to stop the inevitable movement of death along the line of people before it reaches them, and basically the whole film is just elaborate death scene per explanation of how this all works. Scary Tony Todd cameo. Wash, rinse, repeat. Is it great? Not particularly, but it is pretty enjoyable, and you realise how much you enjoyed it after watching the rest of these films, because they get worse, okay? I'm giving Final Destination 70 out of 100 as a piece of work that wasn't particularly original, but was definitely one of the best types of these films we've seen out of a large quantity. However, they couldn't stop there, if only because the sudden ending of the first film left you unsure about quite who was alive. So, thus a franchise was born. Here is my 1-minute review for Final Destination 2. This time it's a big car crash, you see? It's very different from a plane crash. And it's a girl that has the premonition, not a guy. I mean, how is this even a sequel to the other film? It's so different! So Final Destination 2 takes place exactly 1 year after the plane crash from the first film, but there's no other mention in any of the other films of exact time parallels between other incidents like this, so it's just kind of like, we have a girl who has a premonition that there's going to be a big car crash, then she and some people get out, and then they mysteriously start dying off one by one. But this time, instead of just being helpless and wondering what's going on, they go to Clear Rivers, fuck me, who's still alive and is living in an insane asylum, and then she helps them and then she dies, and it's like, oh wow, you were responsible for her death because you made her leave this asylum. It's just exactly the same, you know, it does exactly all the same things. The death scenes are minorly more elaborate. I'll give this 64 out of 100 because, I mean, I think the comedy that they added into this one makes up in some part for the lack of believability, but it's still worse. Then they just kind of kept going. This time with hardly any link to the original. They used a roller coaster and then did exactly the same thing from that point onwards. Here's my 1-minute review for Final Destination 3. So like I was talking about the other day with Florence Pugh doing a crappy horror film during her rise to fame, about, you know, how all actresses end up doing that. Mary Elizabeth Winstead stars in this film, yeah. It's not crappy, I mean it is, but it's not like real garbage yet, okay? Because although, you know, there are like the naked girls and the tangential and stuff, it's like, oh god. Yeah, it's gratuitously violent, you know, and stuff, but the roller coaster scene is iconic. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is actually a good lead, so even though it's a straight up dump fest, you're still able to definitely enjoy a lot of stuff about it, okay? You start at a certain mark for like the first film, and then you could only go down so much to the second film because it only realistically gets so much worse. And then it's the same thing for this, you know. It's a step down every time, but it's not a big one, so you kind of go, well, if I'm going to give that mark, I got to give this mark, you know. So I feel mildly disgusted by the idea of giving this a 60 out of 100, but I think I have to. Somehow it continued. It just continued, okay? Here is my 1 minute review for Final Destination 4. Oh, I mean, the Final Destination. Even though it was not the final. Oh no, it was not.
We just lost a really hot MILF.
They even ran out of a mildly original way to do the opening here. It's just cars again, but this time at a car race. Fuck me pink. So, with a really garbage cast of no one this time, and with the least originality and most trashy everything you could possibly want, the entire selling point of this film was that it was going to be in 3D. Which really hasn't aged well as a selling point. No. This time, the guy has a premonition, but then later he has more vague premonitions that help him save people that are going to die, but he doesn't save them. So it's, you know, it ruins the entire concept of the whole thing for me as well. The 3D was the entire selling point, you know, it didn't have any other selling point. The first was the first, the second was an intriguing sequel, the third had the iconic roller coaster scene. That's the most iconic opening. So this one, it was just kind of like, this one also exists, 3D? This one, despite having all of those tropes, which should make it just still fairly enjoyable even if it's garbage, isn't really, and it gets a 43 out of 100. How can you mess something this dumb and simple up that badly? I think one of the strangest things in the history of cinema is the fact that this clearly money-grabbing franchise, after making the fourth film, stating that it would be the final one, they went right away, because it succeeded fairly well commercially, and brought out the fifth 2 years later. They started working on it immediately, okay? But that's not the weird thing, because it's Hollywood. You expect that. The weird thing is that then the fifth one was praised by critics for the first time ever in the franchise's history, basically, and it made even more money at the box office, and then they stopped making the films? What? Here is my 1 minute review for Final Destination 5. Aha! A bridge! See, how hard was that Final Destination 4? A bridge. Nice, interesting, fairly original way to do it, even though it's still cars, you know? Final Destination 5 is a breath of new, fresh air into this franchise, though I'll never admit that they saved the franchise by bringing back Tony Todd, because he's in this film more than any of the others, and it's just kind of like, oh no, that guy's scary. Nicholas D'Agosto is a good lead, thank God, even though this was basically his last film role before he went and slunk away to live on TV for the rest of his career. Anyway, this one introduces the partially newer concept of being able to kill somebody else to take their lifespan if you're one of the people that's supposed to die. And that's just, I mean, it's something a bit different, okay? It still doesn't make this Shakespeare or anything, but it's a marginally more exciting concept in general, which it surpasses any of the sequels for sure. Maybe not so much the original, but I'm giving this one 67 out of 100. Not so much garbage, but it is still just kind of a mindless popcorn thriller, really. And that's this series, so far anyway. It's been 9 years since Final Destination 5. You'd think they'll make it eventually. I know they will. I'll have an aneurysm if they make Final Destination 6, but they will. It's too painful to try and talk about these movies anymore. They're just plain dumb shit, yeah. So, what series do you guys want to see me do next? Let me know in the comments. If you say Saw, then be prepared, because I'll get equally brutal about those, trust me.